I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you.
So as many of you know by now, the fear porn is in full swing. This virus doesn't seem fit the state's reaction, does it? More on that in a moment, but as of right now, San Francisco just ordered 24-hour-long curfews. There are businesses nationwide are closing up shops, people are being told to stay home from work. Public schools are closing in some areas and closed in others. Manufactured mass hysteria is in full effect. People are panic buying all basic necessities, leaving our most vulnerable, children and the elderly at risk. Cruise liners are shut down, movie theater chains are closing nationwide. Now, why such a reaction from a virus that is at worst as deadly as the flu? You see, per day for example, cancer kills more people. Where is the outrage there? We do not see politicians passing spending bills in an effort to cure a disease that kills over 26,000 people each and every day. Or how about suicide? Suicide takes more lives, in and around 28 times more than this coronavirus, yet no real mass push to solve that one either? So why this heavy-handed state and federal response for a virus that truthfully isn't as deadly as what we have seen with other viruses? Let's have a look. The flu as of this video, CDC estimates that so far this season there have been at least 36 million flu illnesses, 370,000 hospitalizations and 22,000 deaths from flu virus. The coronavirus, if we simply times the current numbers by 12 months, we end up with 2,192,676 infections globally at its current rate. Again globally, deaths would estimate around 86,080 and recovered would be in around 958,596. This is based on current coronavirus numbers, simple math, and also assuming no vaccination for the virus. Again, this is globally. It seems there is more at play here, and if you ask us, there is. To be blunt, they are most likely going to crash the economy and blame it on the virus. Full-blown martial law is on the table, make no mistake. This is all the stench of a Federal Reserve plot at work here. This country is $22 trillion in debt, and the Fed appears to be making its moves to usher in a new currency. Have a listen to this from the New Yorker. Quote, despite an unprecedented intervention over the weekend from the Federal Reserve, which cut short-term interest rates to close to zero and introduced emergency lending measures, the U.S. stock market fell sharply again on Monday. By the close of trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had fallen almost 3,000 points, the worst single-day points loss in history, or 13%. The market is now down by almost a third from its peak in late February. Clearly, investors are spooked by the widening coronavirus outbreak and the likely impact of the public health measures that are being taken to deal with it. But what exactly is going on in the markets and the economy? In search of answers to this question, the New Yorker spoke on Monday with Ian Shepherdson, the founder of Pantheon Macroeconomics, a firm that advises Wall Street firms, hedge funds, and institutional investors. Shepherdson, who was formerly the chief U.S. economist at the international bank HSBC, said that some investors were alarmed by the fact that the Fed felt obliged, because it's a private bank, to act just a couple days before one of its regular policy meetings, and that they were also fretting about the delay in getting both chambers of Congress to pass an emergency spending bill. But Shepherdson also suggested that there were other factors at play, including some psychological ones. He said he believes a lot of people on Wall Street didn't take the virus seriously enough until it was their towns where cases were being discovered and their kids who were being sent home from school. Now the virus is impossible to ignore, and so are its economic consequences. It's going to be catastrophic, Shepherdson said bluntly. This is an economy built on discretionary consumption. He was referring to all the non-essential purchases that people make in their daily lives. Things ranging from new clothes and appliances to personal services such as spa sessions, meals in restaurants, and Uber rides. According to Shepherdson, all this non-essential stuff amounts to about 40% of the US's gross domestic product. In other words, it is enormous, in terms of both its dollar contribution to the economy and the number of people it employs. As of yet, we don't have any overall figures for how shutdowns and curfews and self-isolation are impacting spending, but there are some preliminary indications. Over the weekend, movie ticket sales fell 44% compared to the previous weekend. Shepherdson has been monitoring the number of people eating out through the booking site OpenTable. On Sunday night, the amount was down 48% compared with the previous year. He read out some of the figures for individual states. Alabama, down 38%. California, down 55%. New York, down 47%. New Jersey, down 56%. This is just unbelievable. That was when most restaurants were still operating. Now that many states, including New York and New Jersey, have ordered them to close, apart from making deliveries, business is going to fall even more dramatically. The same is going to be the case for countless other enterprises, small and large. As they shut down, many of them are going to furlough their workers or let them go permanently. This will result in a sharp rise in unemployment and in negative GDP growth, in other words, a recession. The US economy is shrinking as we speak, I have no doubt at all about that, Shepherdson said. On Monday, some Wall Street economists suggested that the GDP could fall at an annualized rate of 5% in the second quarter of this year. Shepherdson believes the downturn could be even more severe than that, with the GDP contracting at a rate of about 10%. A collapse in discretionary consumer spending isn't the only danger, he noted. As businesses react to the crisis, they will likely postpone a lot of capital spending, too. We have no information about that yet, he said. But it is definitely going to get hit badly, as well. It's not just small businesses that are being affected, of course. Airlines, hotels chains, and other corporate entities are hemorrhaging money. Shepherdson said that some airlines could go bust very quickly if they don't receive some sort of aid. People say don't bail them out. They've made billions of dollars in profits and paid their senior executives enormous sums, he said. I'm very sympathetic to that argument. But we are going to need an airline industry in September. So bail them out and sack the CEOs. You can't think in normal terms. This is more like a wartime crisis than a normal economic situation. Shepherdson isn't the only economist making an allusion to the emergency measures that governments make in a war economy. The world is de facto at war. Only with a virus. Olivier Blanchard, the former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, tweeted on Monday. He went on to point out that, during the Second World War, the federal deficit as a percentage of the GDP rose to 26%, as the Roosevelt administration spent heavily on armaments and other programs. Let's not be squeamish, Blanchard added. Shepherdson agrees. This is not a normal economic event in any way, shape, or form, he said. You have to be willing to think what previously would have been unthinkable. If necessary, he said. the Federal Reserve could buy the bonds that the US Treasury issues to finance a massive economic support package, a tactic known as monetization, which also was employed after the Second World War. Why do we worry about monetization? Shepherdson said. Because we are concerned about hyperinflation, but that isn't an issue now, and we have a much bigger problem in our faces. If the economy slumps in the way he thinks it is about to, a lack of adequate financial support for people who are adversely affected could lead to social unrest. The first job of the government is to prevent social breakdown, Shepherdson said. If ever there was a case when quick government action could do that, then this is it. End quote. So there you have it. Your government appears to be killing the economy for the Federal Reserve private bankers under the guise of stopping the spread of the coronavirus. The virus, just so happens, is the perfect scapegoat. It got those people off the street in China in a hurry, didn't it? Through the Fed, it is poised to do much more in the United States. They are setting the stage now to bring in the solution later. Your government doesn't control the Federal Reserve. Again, your government, President, Congress or the House does not control the Federal Reserve. It's a private institution no more federal than Federal Express. It's the Federal Reserve that, with other institutions, controls your government. And now, while you're all distracted by this infectious virus, your government, at the behest of its owners, are moving in. This is what they are distracting you from. Martial law is closer now than it has ever been. The market crash, collapse of business and possibly society itself was born from local, state and federal orders to distance yourself, stay home, self-quarantine etc. The domino effect is both mandated and follows a natural course, out fear alone. Share this video, so others may be informed. Above all, do not fear, fear is a choice. We are anonymous. We are legion. Expect us.
Do you notice that they have the same amount of ink on them? Do you notice that they're made out of the same virtually worthless stuff? It's paper. Did you get it? It's paper. When we create money, we have created an instrument of value that has no value of its own. And it's just as expensive or inexpensive to print the 20 as it is to print the 1. I'm here to prove to you that bankers, especially in the Federal Reserve System, make multiplied trillions of dollars and never create one thing of value. Are you with me? You want to learn this or not? Are you sure? An automaker might make 1 or 2% profit. A builder might make 10% profit. But the printers of money have no limit to the amount of money they can create and the wealth that they can create for themselves. Money's the bloodline of a civilized society. It's the instrument by which a product is sold or bought. Reduce the supply of money below the necessary levels to sustain trade. Reduce the amount of this in the system below the levels necessary to sustain the current trade, and you create a depression. In 1930, let me ask you a question. Did we not have farms? In 1930, did we not have factories? Did we have the greatest roadway system in the world at that time? Yes. Did we have the greatest communication system in the world at that time? Yes. Did we have the greatest opportunity of trade with oceans on both sides and water systems like the Mississippi River running through the width and breadth of this nation? Did we have ability to move our goods and services? Yes. Did we have transportation and roadways? Yes. What did we not? Did we lack workers? Then what happened? I'll tell you what happened. The bankers decided no more money for you. They got out of the stock market. I can give you the family names. They got out of the stock market the year before. Do you know all the money that was lost in the stock market as people began to sell their stocks one after the other, after the other, after the other, and stocks that were valued at $10,000 were selling for 15 cents? And then they had to make a run on the bank because the banks, the stock market had said, oh, I'll tell you what you can do. You can borrow on margin. In other words, you can buy, the economy's really good here in the late 20s. Here's what you can do. You can borrow on margin for stocks. You can buy a stock at $100 worth of stock. You can buy it for $10, and we'll lend you the other money to buy the stock, and the stock is skyrocketing, so you stand to make a great profit. What they didn't tell the American people, and what you still don't know today, is that when they did that, they also put into that legislation that they would have a 24-hour recall. In other words, however much stock you bought, it would make a lot of money, but they could call that stock in, and you would be required not only to pay for the stock, but to pay for what you borrowed at interest from them. In other words, now you got to pay the $100 that they loaned you, but they're the ones that are calling it in. So when they called it in, you didn't have the money to pay for it, so you ran to the bank. But the bank only keeps 20% money on hand. They loan the rest of it out, so only 20% of the people could get any of their money out of the bank. So the banks collapsed, the stock market collapsed, all at the whim of the bankers who decided they wanted to make the money. Watch me. Watch me. All that stuff was being sold. $100,000 farms were selling for $3,000. Who do you think bought them? Why are you looking at me funny? You know what you're looking at? You're looking like sheep that have been led to the slaughter and didn't know it. I'm going to continue. Can I continue? We didn't lack industrial capability. If you don't believe me, I just told you what started the Great Depression. Let me tell you what ended it. World War II. And all of a sudden, the same banks that said no money for farms, no money for food, put people in soup lines, no money for commerce, no money for railroads, no money for roads, no money, no money. All of a sudden said, war? And all of a sudden, factories that were closed down began to work 3 shifts. Where'd the money come from? The same pockets that refused to give it before. Because they decide when it will be printed, how much will be printed, and how much usury or interest will be paid. Not the federal government. The federal government has no say in it, as I will prove to you. Say, debt is a devil. By the simple manipulation of a few wealthy bankers, World War II ended the Great Depression. After successive failures to convince the public of the need of a central bank by wars, these same European bankers financed both sides of the Civil War in this country. You don't even know that. Same bankers, same families, financed both sides of the Civil War. Why? They make the money. After they couldn't get the American people to swallow the lie of a central bank by creating war, they decided they would artificially create, listen to me, recessions, depressions, inflations, and panics. Since only a small amount of deposits are stored at the bank, about 20%, the other 80% is out on loan with security of property and your promise to pay it back. A simple rumor of a bank's insolvency would make a run on that bank. Everybody would get nervous, go pull their money out of the bank, and that bank would collapse. And then the international bankers who started the rumor in the first place would look like prophets. P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S, prophets. Are you hearing something you've never known? Wave your hand. If you think America ought to know, wave your other hand. All right, then don't quit on me. One of the key movers and shakers of this, let's get a central bank by making the people afraid by causing their banks to collapse. One of the key movers and shakers was a man by the name of, you might recognize it, J.P. Morgan. His father was an agent for the wealthy, you might know this name, Rothschild family. Here's a quote. The Federal Reserve. In 1869, J.P. Morgan went to London and reached an agreement for a company known as the Northern Securities that was intended to act as the international bank, as the agent for the Rothschild company in the United States. The first major panic created by the international bankers occurred in 1893 when local bankers from around the nation were told to call in all their loans. Told by who? By these wealthy bankers. Senator Robert Owen testified before a congressional committee that the call on the banks, testified before a congressional committee that the bank he owned, this was a senator, received from the National Bankers Association what came to be known as the Panic Circular of 1893. It stated, you will at once retire 1/3 of your circulation and call in 1/2 of all your loans. Why? Because that makes the bank collapse.